The lease renewal listed me as my sister's guarantor. Reddit family stories? The first time I found out I was supposedly my sister's lease guarantor, I was standing in her apartment while her landlord asked me for my ID. Not my sister, not my parents, me. He had a tablet in one hand, a folder tucked under his arm, and the kind of polite professional expression people use when they are trying to keep a routine inspection routine. My sister was standing near the kitchen counter, twisting the sleeve of her sweater around her thumb. My parents were by the living room window, acting like they were only there for moral support. I had come because my mother said the landlord wanted everyone involved present for the renewal inspection, and I thought that meant family support. Maybe a reference. Maybe some awkward conversation about my sister being late with rent before. Then the landlord looked from the tablet to me and said, "Can I see your ID for the guarantor verification?" For a second, I thought I had misheard him. I actually looked behind me, like there might be another person in the room with my name. Then I looked at my sister. Her face had gone pale in a way that did not look confused. It looked like someone who had been hoping a moment would not arrive, and it had arrived anyway. I said, "I'm sorry. What verification?" The landlord glanced back down at the tablet. "For the lease renewal, you're listed as the guarantor." That was the first time the word hit me in the chest. Guarantor. Not emergency contact. Not reference. Not family member. Guarantor. A person who could be financially responsible if the lease went bad. A person whose name did not belong in that field unless that person had agreed to be there. I kept my voice level because that is what I do when I am scared. I get very calm. It is not because I am mature. It is because if I sound calm enough, people sometimes stop treating me like the unreasonable one. I said, "I'm not her guarantor. I never signed anything." The room changed immediately. My sister stopped twisting her sleeve. My father looked at my mother before he looked at me. My mother did not look shocked. That was what I noticed first, and I still think that was the detail that made everything worse. She looked annoyed, not frightened, not confused, annoyed, like I had interrupted something that was supposed to go smoothly. The landlord's expression shifted in a small, controlled way. He did not accuse anyone of anything. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked back at the tablet and said, "The renewal file has you listed here." My mother gave a little laugh that did not sound like a laugh. "It's just a family thing," she said quickly. "There's no need to make it dramatic." That sentence made my stomach drop more than the landlord's question had. Because if this were truly a mistake, my mother would have said, "What? That can't be right." She would have asked to see the screen. She would have looked at my sister. She would have asked how my name got there. Instead, she told me not to make it dramatic. I looked at my sister again. She was staring at the floor now. My father cleared his throat and said, "Maybe we should just finish the inspection first." I remember thinking that was such a strange thing to say. Not, "Let's figure this out." Not, "There must be an error." Just, "Let's finish the inspection." As if my legal name being attached to my sister's apartment was an inconvenient side topic, like a broken cabinet hinge or a stain on the carpet. The landlord was still holding the tablet. He looked uncomfortable now, but in a professional way, like he had suddenly realized he was standing inside a family argument, with paperwork in his hand. He said, "I do need to verify the guarantor if the renewal is proceeding with this file." I said, "Then this file is wrong." My sister made a small sound, almost like she was about to cry, but she did not say anything yet. My mother's mouth tightened. My father gave me the kind of look he used to give me when I was a teenager and had said something too honest at a bad time. The look meant, "Not here. Not now. Don't embarrass us." But the embarrassing thing was not what I had said. The embarrassing thing was that my name was already in a lease renewal file I had never touched. I asked the landlord, "Does it show a signature from me?" He tapped the screen, paused, and said, "It shows you listed for guarantor verification. I don't have a completed verification on this side." That should have made everyone relieved. If nothing was completed, then the obvious solution was simple. Remove my name, correct the file, ask whoever entered it why they did that. But nobody in my family reacted like that was the obvious solution. My mother stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Can we not do this right now?" That was when I knew this was not a clerical mistake. I did not know yet who had typed my information into the renewal portal. I did not know how long my name had been sitting there. I did not know whether my sister had done it alone, or whether my parents had helped her convince herself it was fine. But I knew one thing, before anyone admitted anything. My mother already knew my name was on that lease. To understand why my mother's reaction hit me so hard, you have to understand the role I had in my family. I was not the favorite in the loud, obvious way people talk about online. Nobody announced at dinner that my sister mattered more. It was quieter than that, and in some ways, harder to argue with. My sister was the one who always had a reason. A reason she was late. A reason she forgot. A reason the bill surprised her. A reason the job did not work out. My parents did not describe her as irresponsible. They described her as overwhelmed. They described me as capable. Those sound like compliments until you realize capable can become another word for available. I had helped before. I paid part of a deposit once because my sister had waited too long to save. I covered a late utility bill after my mother called and said my sister was already embarrassed enough. I sent grocery money more than once. None of those amounts ruined me, and at the time, it felt easier to help than to spend 3 days being told I was cold. But I had one line I never crossed. I would not co-sign. I would not be on someone else's loan. I would not attach my credit, rental history, or legal name to another adult's promises. That was not a secret. I had said it clearly before. The first time was when my sister wanted a used car, and my father suggested I just help her get approved. I said no. The second time was when she was moving apartments, and hinted that having me, as backup, would make the application easier. I said I could help her compare places, I could help her move boxes, but I was not signing anything. My exact words were, "I'm not putting my name on paperwork. I'm not responsible for." My father had sighed then and said, "You always make things sound so official." That was the problem. To them, official was just a word people used when they wanted to avoid helping. To me, official meant consequences. It meant my name did not disappear when everyone's feelings settled down. It meant if someone stopped paying, the paper did not care that I was only trying to be nice. My sister knew that. My parents knew that. So when the landlord asked me for ID at the inspection, the shock was not just that my name was there. The shock was that they had put it there despite already knowing the answer would have been no. And the worst part is, I almost understood how they got there emotionally. My sister's life had always been treated like a group project. If she missed a deadline, everyone discussed who could fix it. If she ran short, everyone discussed who could cover it. If she panicked, the emergency became more important than the boundary crossed on the way there. I do not think my parents saw themselves as villains. I think they saw me as the strong one. And strong people, in their minds, we're supposed to absorb impact. That sounds noble when you say it at a family dinner. It feels different when your name is sitting in a landlord's renewal file. Before all this happened, my sister had been in that apartment for about 2 years. It was not fancy, but it was stable. And stability was something she treated like luck instead of maintenance. She had changed jobs twice. She had been late on rent at least once that I knew of, though my mother always described it as a timing issue. Somehow every detail made my sister sound unlucky instead of involved. I tried not to judge her too harshly. Rent is expensive. 1 bad month can turn into 3 bad months quickly. But I also knew I had become the person my family called when they wanted a problem solved without anyone saying the pattern out loud. So when my mother first mentioned a lease renewal, I did not assume anything illegal or sneaky. She brought it up casually, the way she brought up things she wanted me to care about without directly asking me to care. Your sister's renewal is coming up, she said. She's been stressed. I said, is she behind again? My mother immediately said, don't say it like that. That was usually how these conversations started. I would ask a practical question, and she would react like practicality was cruelty. Then I would soften my tone, and somewhere between softening my tone and defending myself, I would end up helping. This time, I said, I'm just asking what the issue is. She may need some support with the paperwork, my mother said. That word came back later. Paperwork, not money, not guarantor, not legal responsibility. Paperwork, a soft word, a harmless word. The kind of word you use when you already know the real one will make someone say no. At the time, I only felt a small warning in my stomach. I told her I could look over forms if my sister was confused, but I was not signing anything. My mother got quiet for a second, then said, nobody asked you to sign anything. And technically, at that moment, nobody had. But a few days later, my sister texted me asking if I still used the same email for important stuff. Then my father asked whether my current address was still the same as last year. When I asked why, he said, just making sure family records are up to date. Family records. I remember staring at that message longer than it deserved, because something about it felt rehearsed, not dramatic, not enough to confront anyone over, just wrong. Like I was hearing people walk around a subject they had all agreed not to name. Then the first email from the property management office landed in my inbox, and the subject line had my sister's apartment complex in it. The email from the property management office was not dramatic. That was almost what made it worse. It did not say final notice. It did not say urgent fraud alert. It did not say anything that would have made a normal person jump out of their chair. It was one of those bland automated messages with a gray logo at the top, a reference number in the corner, and a sentence about lease renewal documentation pending. My sister's apartment complex name was in the subject line, and my full name was in the greeting. I stared at it for a long time before clicking anything. At first I told myself there had to be a harmless explanation. Maybe my sister had put me down as an emergency contact years ago. Maybe the office had copied me by mistake. Maybe my mother had given them my email because she wanted me to help my sister understand the renewal packet. I was trying very hard to be reasonable, because in my family, being reasonable usually meant giving everyone else 3 or 4 chances to make sense before I admitted something was wrong. The email said there were documents available for review through the resident portal. It did not show the whole file in the email itself, just a link and a note that some renewal information still needed verification. I did not click the link right away. Instead, I texted my sister. Why am I getting emails from your apartment complex? She did not answer for almost an hour, which was strange because she had been texting me plenty that week about small things. When she finally replied, it was short. Oh, probably renewal stuff. Mom said you might help me look at it. That answer bothered me because it explained the least important part. It explained why she wanted help, not why the management office had my email. I asked, did you give them my information? She responded with, I don't know. I had to fill out a lot of stuff. That was when I started feeling the old family fog settle in. The kind where nobody lies directly, but somehow, every answer moves you farther from the truth. My sister was very good at sounding overwhelmed, in a way that made follow-up questions feel like an attack. If I pushed, she would say she was stressed. If I asked again, my mother would call me and say I was making her spiral. If I backed off, the problem would somehow become mine anyway. So I did not back off. I wrote, what kind of stuff? She read it and did not reply. That evening, my mother called. She did not start with hello. She started with, your sister is really anxious right now, so please don't interrogate her. I remember looking at my phone and almost laughing, because I had asked 2 normal questions. That was another pattern in my family. When I asked for basic information, they called it interrogation. When they wanted access to my money, time, or documents, they called it support. I said, I got an email from her property manager. I'm asking why. My mother sighed like I had already failed some test. It's lease renewal. They need a lot of paperwork now. Everything is online. It's not a big deal. Why do they have my email? I don't know, she said too quickly. Maybe your sister put you as a reference. A reference for what? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for me to hear that she was choosing words. Just support. They asked for family contacts sometimes. That was not how rental applications worked. At least not in any apartment I had ever rented. They might ask for emergency contacts. They might ask for references. But they did not usually send renewal documents to a random family contact unless that person was connected to the file in some specific way. I said, I'm not signing anything. My mother's voice sharpened. Nobody said you were. That was exactly what she had said before. The same sentence, almost the same tone. Nobody asked you to sign anything. Nobody said you were. It should have reassured me. Instead, it made me feel like they were building the conversation around that one technicality. Nobody had asked me to sign. But that did not mean they had not placed my name somewhere it did not belong. The next day, my father texted me, "Can you just be nice about this? Your sister has been under a lot of pressure." I asked, "Pressure from what?" He replied, "Rentals are difficult now. They want guarantees for everything." Guarantees. That was the first time one of them got close to the real word. Not reference, not family contact. Guarantee. I stared at that message and felt something in my chest go cold. I wrote back, "Do they need a guarantor?" He did not answer directly. He sent, "Don't make this legal before anyone even talks." That was such a strange reply that it told me more than a straight answer would have. I had not made anything legal. The apartment complex had. The renewal file had. Whoever entered my information had. I was the only one still trying to find out what category my own name had been placed in. By then, I was done asking my family to explain the email. I went back to the property management message and opened the portal link. It took me to a login page that asked me to verify my email and a code. I hesitated before continuing because part of me still wanted to believe I would find something harmless. Emergency contact. Reference. Maybe authorized person for inspection scheduling. The page loaded slowly. There was a menu on the side with my sister's unit number, the renewal term, and a section labeled documents. Under pending items, there was a line that said guarantor verification incomplete. I clicked it. For a moment, all I saw were form fields. Legal name, email, phone number, current address, relationship to applicant. Then my eyes moved back to the top of the section, and I saw my own full name sitting under the heading, Guarantor. I stared at the word for so long that the screen dimmed. Guarantor. There are words that sound ordinary until they are attached to your own name. I had seen that word before. I had seen it on rental applications, student housing forms, loan paperwork, all the boring adult documents where someone with better credit agrees to stand behind someone else. It was never a word I treated casually, because it was not casual. It meant if the person on the lease failed, the landlord had someone else to call, someone else to bill, someone else whose name could be pulled into the consequences. And in that portal, that someone else was me. My full legal name was there. My current address was there. My email, obviously, because that was how I had received the message. My phone number was there too, and that was the first detail that made my hands go cold instead of just angry. An office could have gotten my email from my sister. My name could have been typed from memory, but my current address and phone number meant somebody had sat down and filled this out like a plan. The relationship field said sibling. I took screenshots before I did anything else. I know that sounds cold, and maybe it was. But when you grow up in a family that can turn a simple question into an accusation, documentation becomes less about winning and more about staying sane. I took screenshots of the guarantor heading, the pending verification note, the form fields, the timestamp near the submission line, and the section showing that verification was incomplete. I sent the screenshots to my own email and saved them in a folder with the kind of boring name nobody would click by accident. Then I called my sister. She did not answer. I called again. Still nothing. A few minutes later, she texted me, "Can you not call right now? I'm at work." I wrote back, "Why am I listed as your guarantor?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, nothing. That was when I called my mother. Because if my sister was avoiding me, I knew exactly where the script had probably been written. My mother answered on the second ring, and before I even finished saying, "I opened the portal," she exhaled, like I had just confirmed I was going to be difficult. I said, "My name is in the guarantor section." She said, "Okay, first of all, calm down." That sentence did something to me. I was calm. I was standing in my kitchen with screenshots open on my laptop, speaking in the same careful voice I used at work when something needed to be fixed without making everyone panic. But in my family, calm down never meant I was acting hysterical. It meant I had noticed something they wanted me to ignore. I said, "Don't tell me to calm down. Tell me why my name is there." "It's not final," she said. "You haven't signed anything." "That is not an answer. It's just part of the renewal," she said. "Your sister needed to put someone down." "Someone?" I repeated. "She put me down as guarantor." My mother got quiet for half a second, and then her tone changed into the one she used when she wanted to sound wounded but reasonable. "You know she's been under a lot of stress. The apartment office was making everything complicated. She was scared." I looked at the screen again. My name looked very calm in that form, which somehow made me angrier. Forms do not show panic. They do not show a sister crying or a mother softening the edges of a story. They show what someone typed. I said, "Being scared does not give her permission to use my information." "She didn't use anything," my mother said. "She listed you. There's a difference." There it was. The first attempt to shrink the issue. Not use. List. Not liability. Paperwork. Not consent. Family. I asked, "Did you know she was doing this?" My mother said, "I knew she was trying to get the renewal handled." That's not what I asked. Another pause. This one was longer. I told her you would probably help if it came to that. I remember closing my eyes because I did not want to say the first thing that came into my head. Probably help. That was the way my family had handled my boundaries for years. If I had not screamed no, they treated maybe as yes. If I said no calmly, they treated it as negotiable. If they were desperate enough, they treated my future guilt as permission. I said, "I have told all of you before that I will not be on legal paperwork for her." My mother's voice sharpened. "You make it sound like we committed some crime. I'm saying my name is in a legal document without my consent. It's a renewal portal," she snapped. "Not a court summons." I almost laughed then, not because it was funny, but because that was exactly how my family survived every boundary. They compared the thing they did to something worse, and if it was not the worst possible version, they acted like you had no right to object. It was not a court summons. It was not a signed lease yet. It was not final. It was not like anyone had taken money. It was not like anyone had actually come after me. The goalpost always moved to wherever they could stand without admitting they had crossed the first line. I said, "Who entered my address?" My mother did not answer. "Who entered my phone number?" She said, "Your sister has that information. We all have each other's information. For emergencies," I said, "not for lease guarantees." Then my sister finally called me back. My mother must have texted her, because the first thing my sister said was, "Please don't yell at me." Again, I was not yelling. I put her on speaker, with my laptop still open in front of me. Why did you list me as your guarantor? She started crying immediately, but it was not the kind of crying that answered anything. It was the kind that made me feel like the cruel one for continuing the conversation. I didn't know what else to do, she said. They were going to make renewal difficult. Who told you to use my name? I didn't think it would go through without you verifying, she said. That was the second answer. That was not an answer. I said, that means you knew I would have to verify it. She was quiet. My mother cut in from the other call, because apparently we were now doing this as a family conference without anyone admitting they had arranged one. Nobody was trying to trap you. We just needed to get the process started. The process. Another soft word. I looked at the screenshots again. My information was there neatly, like a decision someone had already made. I said, take my name off the file. My sister sniffed. I don't know if I can now. The inspection is already scheduled. That was the first time anyone mentioned the inspection to me like it mattered. Before that, it had been renewal, stress, paperwork, support. Now suddenly there was a date, a landlord, a scheduled inspection connected to a file that had my name in it. I asked, what does the inspection have to do with me? My sister did not answer. My mother did. It would just be easier if you came, she said. That way, if they have questions, you can clear it up. I said, clear what up? I am telling you right now, I am not the guarantor. My mother's voice went low and tight. Can you stop saying it like that? You sound like you're trying to get your sister in trouble. That was the moment my anger settled into something colder, because I understood then that they did not see the problem as my name being used. They saw the problem as me naming it. I told them again, slowly, remove me from the file. My mother said, it is not like they will actually come after you. And that was the sentence that told me everything I needed to know. They had thought about the risk. They had measured it. They had decided it was acceptable, because I was not the one they were trying to protect. After my mother said, it is not like they will actually come after you, there was a silence on the call that felt almost peaceful. Not because anything was resolved, but because the sentence had stripped the situation down to what it really was. They knew there was risk. They just thought the risk belonged on me. My sister started crying harder, and I could hear my mother shifting from annoyed to protective in real time. Look what you're doing, she said. Not to my sister, but to me. She is already scared enough. I said, she should be scared. She put my name on a lease file without asking me. She was trying to keep a roof over her head, and I'm trying not to become legally responsible for rent I never agreed to pay. My mother made a frustrated sound. You always do this. You take something that should be simple and turn it into a legal argument. That was how they kept trying to move the conversation. If I said lease, they said home. If I said guarantor, they said sister. If I said consent, they said family. My sister finally spoke between breaths. I didn't think it would hurt you. I looked at the laptop screen again. My name was still sitting there under guarantor, perfectly typed, perfectly calm. That's not the standard, I said. You don't get to use my information because you decided it probably wouldn't hurt me. I was desperate. She said, I believe you, I said, and I meant it. But desperate is not consent. That was when my father entered the conversation. My mother must have put me on speaker, because his voice came from farther away at first, then closer. He sounded calm in the way he always sounded when he thought everyone else was being emotional, and he was the only adult in the room. Let's all take a breath, he said. No one is saying you have to pay anything today. I gripped the edge of the counter because that sentence was built like a trap. Today. Not ever. Not unless I agreed. Just today, as if the only problem was whether money would leave my account before dinner. I said, I am saying I do not agree to be on her lease in any capacity. You're not on the lease, he said. You're listed for verification. Listed as guarantor. Pending verification, he said, like the pending part erased the guarantor part. They wanted it both ways. It was not real when I was upset about it, but it was real enough that I needed to show up and fix it. I asked him, did you know she put my name in? He did not answer right away. My father was not like my mother. My mother filled silence with guilt. My father used silence like a tool, like if he waited long enough, I might soften the question myself. Finally, he said, I knew they were having trouble with the renewal. That is also not what I asked. He sighed. Your sister needed a guarantor option. We discussed possibilities. Possibilities. That word landed almost worse than yes, because I understood what that meant in my family. They had sat somewhere and discussed my name like an option. Like my credit and rental history were tools in a drawer. Like my consent was a detail to be handled later. I asked, was I present for that discussion? My sister whispered, please don't do this. I'm asking because apparently my name was present even when I wasn't. My mother snapped. That is such an ugly way to say it. No, I said. It is an accurate way to say it. Nobody liked that. I could feel it through the phone, the collective family recoil that happened whenever I stopped translating their behavior into softer language. My mother said I was punishing my sister for being poor. My sister said I was making her feel like a criminal. My father said no one had forged my signature, so I needed to stop acting like the worst case scenario had already happened. I said, the reason it is not finalized is because they need me to verify. That does not make this okay. It means you started a process you had no right to start. My father's voice got flatter. This is exactly why your mother did not want to tell you until we had more information. That sentence made everything in me pause. I said, until you had more information? Nobody spoke. So you did know before I opened the portal. My mother jumped in immediately. We knew she was struggling. We knew the office was being difficult. That is not the same as knowing every detail. But she was moving too fast now. She always did that when she needed to cover a sentence someone else had let slip. My father had said the quiet part. They did not want to tell me. Not because they were confused, but because telling me early would give me time to say no before the situation became urgent. My sister said, I thought if you saw how serious it was, you'd understand. What I understand, I said, is that you put my name in first and plan to explain later. She cried harder. My mother said, you are twisting it. I asked, then untwist it. Who entered my information? That should have been easy. One person typed it. One person clicked submit. One person had to decide which fields to fill out. But suddenly nobody knew. My sister said the portal was confusing. My mother said she was not sitting next to her for every second. My father said it did not matter who typed it because nothing had been signed. It was amazing how many adults could be involved in a form without any of them being responsible for the form. By then, my sister had stopped crying enough to talk. Her voice was small. The inspection is Friday. If this falls apart, I don't know what I'm going to do. There it was. The deadline. The emotional fuse. I could almost see the shape of the plan now. Enter my information. Let the renewal process move forward. Wait until the inspection or verification point. Then surround me with panic and family obligation until saying no felt like pushing my sister into the street. I said, I'm not attending an inspection as your guarantor. My mother said, no one is asking you to lie. Yes, you are. No, my father said, we're asking you to be reasonable. If they need your ID, you show it. If they need a signature, we talk about it then. Nobody is forcing you this second. The words were calm. The meaning was not. If they need your ID, if they need a signature, not if, when. That was the moment I understood they had not been hoping the portal would disappear. They had been waiting for the verification step to make my refusal look like the thing that ruined everything. After my father said, if they need your ID, you show it, I stopped trying to make them understand the boundary. That was harder than it sounds. For years, my instinct had been to explain one more time. If I could find the right words, the calmest tone, the most reasonable comparison, maybe my family would finally see the difference between helping someone and being used. But that night, listening to all three of them talk around the same basic fact, I realized they understood the difference perfectly. They just did not think the difference mattered enough to protect me. So I got off the phone. My mother tried to keep me on. She said we were all upset. My sister said I was scaring her. My father said hanging up would not solve anything, but staying on the call was only giving them more chances to make me defend a boundary that should not have needed a debate. I said, I'm going to review the file and contact the property office directly. Then, I ended the call before anyone could turn that into another argument. The first thing I did was make a folder. It sounds ridiculous, but it calmed me down. I put the screenshots in order. The portal page with my name, the guarantor verification incomplete line, the fields with my address and phone number, the email that had been sent to me by the property management office. Then I went back into the portal and started reading carefully instead of emotionally. That was when I noticed the submission date. It was not from that day. It was not from the day before. The guarantor information had been entered 11 days earlier. For a moment, I just sat there with my hand on the mouse. 11 days. Almost 2 full weeks of my name sitting in that file while my mother talked about paperwork, and my sister asked about my email, and my father checked whether my address was still current. 11 days where nobody had said, we put your name down. 11 days where they had let the situation move forward and waited for the process to catch me. I opened my messages with my sister and scrolled back. There it was. 3 days after the submission date, she had asked, do you still use the same email for important stuff? 2 days after that, my father had asked if my address was still the same. My mother's first renewal paperwork comment had come after the guarantor field was already filled. The order mattered. It changed everything. If they had asked me first and panicked after I said no, that would have been bad enough. If my sister had clicked the wrong box and immediately told me, I would still have been angry. But at least it would have been a mistake she brought to me. But this was different. They submitted my information first. Then they circled back to collect the details they needed. Then they waited until the inspection was close enough that my refusal would look like sabotage. I took more screenshots. Not because I wanted to build some dramatic case against my family, but because I knew what would happen if I did not. By morning, the story would be that I misunderstood. By Friday, the story would be that I had agreed and then changed my mind. By next month, my mother would be telling relatives I almost made my sister homeless because I did not want to show an ID. Documentation was the only thing that kept the timeline from becoming whatever they needed it to be. I wrote a short email to the property manager, but I did not send it immediately. I read it 3 times because I wanted it to be factual, not emotional. I wrote that I had received access to a renewal file connected to my sister's unit, that I appeared to be listed as a guarantor, and that I had not agreed to serve as guarantor, had not signed any lease documents, and did not authorize my information to be used for that purpose. I asked what steps were needed to correct the file. Then I saved it as a draft. Part of me still hesitated. That is the part I am not proud of. Even with the screenshots, even with the timestamp, even with my father basically saying they expected me to show ID if asked, I still thought about what would happen to my sister. I pictured her crying in that apartment. I pictured my mother telling me I had gone nuclear. I pictured my father saying I should have handled it quietly. I pictured the landlord looking at my sister differently because of something I said. That is how the system keeps working. It makes the person with the boundary feel responsible for the consequences of the person who crossed it. The next morning my mother texted me before I'd even had coffee. Please do not contact the landlord behind your sister's back. You will make this worse. I stared at the phrase behind your sister's back for a while. My name had been entered into a guarantor field without my knowledge, but somehow I was the one being sneaky if I contacted the landlord whose file contained my information. I replied, I am contacting them about my own name. She wrote back almost immediately. You are being very cold. I did not answer that one. A few minutes later, my sister texted me, can we please just get through Friday and talk after? Friday was the inspection. That message confirmed what I had already suspected. They were not trying to fix the file before the inspection. They were trying to get through the inspection with the file intact. The plan was not necessarily sophisticated, but it did not need to be. They were counting on pressure, timing, and my old habit of not embarrassing them in front of outsiders. My father called around noon. I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted, you need to think carefully about how this looks. If you make a scene in front of the landlord, you may cost your sister her home. I read that message twice. He was not saying, if your sister used your information, that could cost her the renewal. He was saying if I named the truth, I would be responsible for the consequence. That was the exact logic my family had always used, just with higher stakes. The person who caused the problem was fragile. The person who refused to cover it was cruel. I finally sent the email to the property manager. I kept it plain. No accusations, no family explanation, no emotional details. Just the facts. My name was in the guarantor section. I had not agreed. I had not signed. I wanted the record corrected and did not consent to verification. The reply came a few hours later. It was short, professional, and somehow more validating than anything my family had said. The property manager wrote that guarantor verification was still pending, that no guarantor would be accepted without proper ID and completed documents, and that I could clarify my position at the scheduled inspection if I was attending. Clarify my position. That phrase stayed with me, because that was exactly what my family did not want me to do. They did not want clarity. They wanted fog. They wanted me present enough to be useful, silent enough to be manageable, and guilty enough to cooperate. That evening, my mother called again. I answered because I wanted to know what version of the story they were using now. She sounded calmer, which immediately made me more cautious. Your father and I talked, she said. We think everyone just needs to be careful on Friday. I said, I already emailed the property manager. The silence that followed was not long, but it was sharp. You did what? I told them I did not consent to being guarantor. My mother inhaled through her nose. Why would you do that before we had a chance to handle this as a family? Because my name was used as paperwork before anyone handled it as a family. She ignored that. Listen to me. Your sister cannot afford for this to turn into some accusation. You need to come Friday, stay calm, and not make a scene. I almost said I was not the one who had made a scene, but by then, I knew that would only lead us back into the same circle. So I said, if the landlord asks me directly, I am going to tell the truth. My mother's voice dropped. Do not embarrass us in front of the landlord. By Friday morning, I had already decided that I was not going to argue with my family in the parking lot, in the hallway, or in my sister's apartment. That was the only way I trusted myself to go. I knew if I let them pull me into another emotional debate before the landlord arrived, they would try to wear me down sentence by sentence. My mother would make it about loyalty. My sister would make it about fear. My father would make it about practicality. And somehow, by the time the landlord asked a direct question, I would be expected to answer like the previous 11 days had not happened. So I drove there with one rule for myself. Answer only what was asked, and do not protect the lie. My sister's apartment complex looked completely ordinary when I arrived. That almost bothered me. The parking lot was half full, someone was carrying groceries up the stairs, and a maintenance worker was loading tools into a cart near the office. It was strange how normal the world looked when I was walking into a room where my family had attached my name to a responsibility I never accepted. My parents were already there. My mother was standing near my sister's door with her purse held tight against her side. My father had his hands in his pockets and nodded at me like this was a mildly uncomfortable appointment, not the end point of a secret they had been managing for almost 2 weeks. My sister opened the door before I knocked. Her eyes were red, but she was dressed nicely, like she wanted the landlord to see someone stable and prepared. My mother hugged me too quickly. It was not affectionate. It was strategic. The kind of hug that said, please remember you belong to us before you speak. You're here, she whispered. I said I would be, I said. She pulled back and searched my face. Please, just be calm. I almost said, I have been calm this entire time, but I did not. That was bait, and I knew it. Instead, I stepped inside and looked around the apartment. It was cleaner than I had ever seen it. My sister had clearly spent hours making it look like someone who never missed deadlines lived there. The counters were clear. The couch had pillows arranged neatly. There was a small stack of papers on the kitchen table, but when I looked at it, my sister moved closer to it like she could block paper with her body. The landlord arrived a few minutes later with a tablet and a folder. He was polite to everyone. He introduced himself again, even though I had only spoken to him by email. If he knew this was going to be awkward, he did not show it openly. That made it worse for my family, I think. They had prepared for me to be emotional. They had not prepared for a neutral person to be procedural. The inspection started normally. He checked the smoke detector, looked under the sink, made a note about a loose cabinet handle, and asked my sister a couple of routine questions about renewal timing. My mother smiled too much. My father kept adding small, unnecessary comments, like how my sister had always taken care of the place, and how everyone wanted the renewal handled smoothly. I said nothing. Then the landlord moved to the kitchen table, opened the folder, and tapped something on his tablet. My sister went very still. My mother's smile tightened. My father looked at me once, just briefly, like a warning. The landlord said, before we finish, I need to address the renewal file. That was the moment the apartment changed. It was not loud. Nobody gasped. Nobody slammed a hand on the table. It was quieter than that. The air went hard. My sister looked down at her hands. My mother straightened like she was about to interrupt. My father shifted his weight toward me, and I had the sudden, clear feeling that all three of them had been waiting for this exact sentence. The landlord looked at me. You're listed here as the guarantor. Since verification is still incomplete, can I see your ID to match the file? There it was. The same question from the beginning, now in its full context. Not hypothetical, not family paperwork, not emotional support. ID verification for a guarantor file. My mother said, we can probably handle that after. I spoke before she could finish. I'm not the guarantor, I said. I never agreed to be the guarantor, and I never signed anything for this lease. The silence after that was not like the silence on the phone. This one had witnesses. This one had a tablet, a folder, a landlord, and a file my family could not soften with tone. My sister made a small sound and covered her mouth. My mother turned toward me so quickly that her earrings swung. My father said my name under his breath, not like a question, but like a warning. The landlord did not react dramatically. He looked down at the tablet, then back at me. You did not submit this guarantor information? No, I said. I received access to the file after my information was already entered. I emailed your office to clarify that I do not consent to being listed or verified as guarantor. My mother's face changed when I said I had emailed. She had known I said it on the phone. Hearing it in front of the landlord was different. It made the private family argument part of the official record. She stepped in quickly. This is just a misunderstanding. She's his sister. He was going to help. And then everyone got upset. The landlord looked at her, then at me. Were you going to act as guarantor? No, I said. My father cleared his throat. What we mean is, there was discussion. No one was trying to force anything. I looked at him then. I was not part of that discussion. That landed harder than I expected. My sister started crying for real. Not loudly, but enough that my mother moved toward her. My mother said, "This is not necessary." The landlord's voice stayed even. "I need to understand who entered the guarantor information." Nobody answered. It was such a simple question. That was the worst part. It was not emotional. It was not cruel. It was not dramatic. It was just a question I had been asking for days, asked by someone they could not accuse of being selfish. Who entered the guarantor information? My sister wiped her face. "I filled out the renewal," she said quietly, "but I didn't think it counted until he verified." My mother immediately said she was confused by the portal. The landlord looked back at the tablet. The information entered includes his full name, phone number, address, email, and relationship. My father said, "Families have each other's information. That doesn't mean there was bad intent." The landlord paused. It was a small pause, but I noticed it. It was the pause of someone hearing an answer that did not answer the question. I said, "I did not authorize any of that information to be used for this." My mother's voice dropped. "You're making your sister sound like she committed fraud." I did not look at her. I kept looking at the landlord, because if I looked at my mother, I knew she would drag me back into the old family room, where feelings mattered more than facts. "I'm stating that I did not consent," I said. The landlord nodded slowly. "Then I can't proceed with you as guarantor." My sister started crying harder. "So, what happens to my renewal?" The landlord closed the folder halfway, not sharply, but final enough that everyone noticed. "We'll need to pause the guarantor portion of the file. If you still require a guarantor, you'll need to submit someone who agrees to complete verification. Otherwise, we can review what other options are available, but I can't accept an unverified guarantor." My mother said, "But the inspection itself is fine, right?" He looked at her with the same professional calm. "The unit inspection notes are separate. The renewal file is not complete." That sentence did more than anything I could have said. The renewal file is not complete. Not because I was dramatic. Not because I was cold. Not because I hated my sister. Because the file had been built around a person who had not agreed to be in it. My father tried one more time. "Can't we just take a minute and discuss it?" The landlord said, "You can discuss whatever you need to as a family. But from our side, guarantor verification cannot be completed by someone who is saying they did not consent." My mother turned on me then. Not fully, not in the screaming way people imagine. She used a whisper, because the landlord was still there. "Are you happy now?" That was the moment I almost lost the calm. Not because she yelled, but because she still thought this was about happiness. Like I had driven there for victory. Like I wanted my sister to be humiliated. Like the only reason someone refuses to be used is because they enjoy watching people suffer. I said, "No," and that was all. No explanation, no defense, no speech. The landlord made a few more notes. He told my sister the office would follow up about the renewal file and any alternative requirements. He told me, professionally, that he had received my email and would note that I disputed and declined guarantor status. Then he left the apartment with the same quiet politeness he had entered with, except nothing in the room was the same after he closed the door. For about 5 seconds, nobody spoke. Then my sister turned to me with tears running down her face and said, "You just ruined everything." My mother wrapped an arm around her and looked at me like I had done exactly what she warned me not to do. My father rubbed his forehead and said, "There had to be a better way to handle that." I looked at the three of them standing together, and I understood the family picture they were trying to make. My sister was devastated. My mother was protecting her. My father was disappointed. And I was supposed to be the cold one who walked in and broke the renewal. But the truth was sitting on the table, in a file the landlord had just paused. I had not ruined the lease. I had only refused to become the signature they planned to put under it. The first thing I did after leaving my sister's apartment was sit in my car and breathe. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel powerful. I did not feel like someone who had just won a family argument. I felt shaky and embarrassed and strangely tired, like my body had been waiting for permission to admit how tense it had been. Through the windshield, I could see my mother's car parked 2 spaces over. I kept expecting one of them to come outside and continue the fight in the parking lot, but nobody did. That almost made it worse. The silence meant they were probably inside, deciding what version of the story they were going to tell next. So I wrote mine down first. I opened my email and replied to the property manager before I even started the car. I thanked him for clarifying the file during the inspection, then stated again that I had not agreed to serve as guarantor, had not signed any lease documents, had not authorized my information to be used, and did not consent to any verification connected to my sister's lease. No accusations, no family history, no emotional details, just the facts. Because facts were the only language this situation had respected so far. The reply came the next morning. The property manager confirmed that my guarantor verification would not proceed, that my dispute would be noted on the renewal file, and that my sister would need to provide an approved guarantor or discuss other renewal options with the office. He did not call it fraud. He did not call it family drama. He simply treated consent like something that mattered. I saved that email in the same folder as the screenshots. My family did not treat it that way. My sister sent the first message around noon. "I hope you understand what you did." I stared at that sentence because it sounded so much like something my mother would say. Not, "I understand what I did." Not, "I am sorry I entered your information." What you did. As if the story began at the moment I refused to cooperate. I replied, "I understand that I corrected a file I never agreed to be part of." She did not answer for 20 minutes. Then she wrote, "I was scared. You knew I was scared." That part still hurt, because yes, I did know. I knew housing was expensive. I knew losing an apartment could wreck someone's life quickly. But fear did not transform my name into shared property. Fear did not make my credit a family emergency fund. Fear did not give anyone permission to start a legal process, and hope my guilt would finish it. My mother called after that. I let it ring. Then she texted, "You made your point." That message almost made me laugh. My point. As if this had been a lesson I wanted to teach. As if I had dragged everyone to the inspection to make some symbolic statement about boundaries. I wrote back, "My point is that my name cannot be used without my consent." She replied, "You could have helped without making your sister look bad." I did not answer immediately. I wanted to ask why my sister looked bad, because the truth was said out loud. I wanted to ask why nobody worried about how I looked when the landlord expected me to verify paperwork I had never seen. Instead, I wrote, "I am not discussing this unless the conversation starts with who entered my information and why." No one answered that for the rest of the day. My father called that evening. I answered because he was the one most likely to give me the practical version of whatever they had decided. He said, "Your sister may have to pay a higher deposit or find someone else." I said, "Then she needs to do that. She doesn't have someone else. That does not make me the default." He sighed. "You know, sometimes being right is not the same as being kind." I had to sit with that one, because it was not completely empty. That was why this story still bothers me. I know my boundary hurt my sister. I know it made her situation harder. I know it happened in front of a landlord. But they did not come to me before entering my information. They came to me after the paperwork existed, after the deadline was close, after the social pressure was in place. So I said, sometimes being kind is not the same as being available for liability. My father did not like that. "You sound very cold." "Maybe," I said. "But I am also not the guarantor." That ended the call faster than I expected. 2 days later, my sister finally admitted more than she had before. Not in a dramatic confession. Not with a clean apology. She sent a long message that kept circling the truth without wanting to stand directly in front of it. She said the portal had asked for a guarantor option. She said Mom told her I would probably understand once I saw how serious it was. She said Dad thought it would not matter unless I completed verification. She said she knew I had said no before, but she thought this was different because she was not asking me to pay anything right then. Then, near the end, she wrote, "I should have asked." That was the closest thing to an apology I got from her. I wrote back, "Yes, you should have." I did not add comfort after it. That felt cruel for about 10 minutes, and then it felt honest. I had spent years adding comfort after every boundary, so nobody had to sit with the full weight of what they had done. This time, I let the sentence stand by itself. The lease did not magically collapse overnight. That is not how rentals work, and I do not want to pretend it was instant punishment. The property office gave my sister options. One involved a higher deposit. One involved finding a different guarantor who would actually complete the paperwork. One involved stricter renewal terms. My parents were furious about all of them, because every option required someone other than me to absorb the risk. For the first time, I did not offer a workaround. My mother kept trying for another week. She sent messages about family, loyalty, and how I would regret being so rigid. Then she switched to silence, which used to work on me when I was younger. Back then, if my mother went quiet, I would panic and apologize just to restore the temperature in the room. This time, the quiet felt like space. I used that space to do something I should have done years earlier. I wrote one message to all three of them. I will not sign, verify, co-sign, guarantee, or attach my name, credit, address, ID, or income to anyone else's housing, loans, utilities, or accounts. Do not list me on any paperwork without asking me first. If my information appears in any file I did not authorize, I will contact the company directly and correct it. My mother responded with, "So, this is who you are now." I looked at that sentence for a long time. Then I realized the answer was yes. This was who I was now. Not cruel, not heartless. Still the same person who worried, hesitated, and felt guilty sitting in my car after telling the truth. The difference was that guilt was no longer enough to make me hand over my name. I saved the property manager's confirmation. I saved the screenshots. I unpinned the family group chat from the top of my phone. I did not block them, but I stopped making myself instantly reachable for emergencies they created and renamed as love. My sister eventually found another arrangement. My parents never told me the details, probably because the details did not support the version where I had destroyed everything. Things between us are polite now, but thinner. My mother still thinks I made the family look bad. My father still thinks I could have handled it with more grace. My sister has not asked me for help with paperwork again. I can live with all of that. Because I did not make my sister homeless. I did not sabotage her lease. I did not create the crisis in that apartment. I just stopped letting my family build her safety net out of my name.